Elise, thank you so much for coming on the show. It means a lot to have you here. You are the CEO of Praxis Labs. Can you tell me how you became the CEO and co-founder of Praxis Labs? Let's start there.
Oh, I love starting there at the beginning. So yeah, at the highest level, I mean, Praxis Labs is an immersive learning and development company. We're focused on building the critical human skills needed for the modern, diverse global workforce, giving feedback, navigating difficult conversations, all of those great things. And we use simulations and Gen AI at scale to do that with clients like in the Fortune 1000. But my journey to Praxis Labs, I mean, is personal. And I think that's probably true for a lot of founders. Very much inspired by my family and my parents' story in navigating systems and structures not set up for them in Chicago education system. And so for me, I've really focused on how do you scale access? How do you scale opportunity so that luck isn't the main contributing factor to outcomes? Scale brought me to technology. I ended up at IBM. And they had announced this cool thing they were calling Watson that was playing chess. And I saw the applicability to how could you use machine learning and AI technology, but for learning? How could you use it to both personalize and measure learning experiences? And so I ended up spending a handful of years at IBM before the Watson Group was announced, building out some of the first generation of Watson for Education products. Loved the innovation of that. Took all of those things that I learned there, have applied them at Praxis. But I think another piece of the journey that led me to Praxis was the role I did after, which was I was an investor at a philanthropic fund investing in innovation and learning. Again, every through line has had learning and education at its core. And I was in a portfolio investing in leadership development, platforms and vendors and entrepreneurs. And it was in that role where I was asked to ladder up the impact of the portfolio year over year that I realized a lot of the learning solutions we were providing in enterprises weren't always research backed. They weren't always using learning science or behavioral economics. It meant a lot of them were one and done, not continuous and reinforced, which is how we learn best. It meant that a lot of them were awareness-based learning experiences, not practice or experiential-based learning moments. And it all meant we couldn't measure beyond how many people went through learning, training, and how valuable they thought it was on a scale of 1 to 5. When really what we wanted to know was what attitudes, mindsets, and behaviors did this intervention change? And what does that mean for the organizational outcomes that have invested in this type of training for their people? And so it was also at that fund that I got exposed to immersive learning out of the lab at Stanford and immersive experiences more broadly. And I just saw the power of using immersive to not just help us build empathy and perspective for new and different backgrounds in our own, but to help us practice behaviors in a safe space where we could make mistakes, we could continue learning, where we could measure everything in an immersive environment. So you could give personalized feedback. You could see trends at the aggregate. And I was lucky enough to end up at Stanford, where I did my MBA and Master's of Education. I had a coffee date with this brilliant woman named Heather Shen, who was wrapping up her Master's of Electrical Engineering. And we bonded over the belief that workplaces could work better for everyone, that products and services could better serve everyone. And we've been on the journey that's Praxis Labs since. That coffee date was with Heather Shen, who's my co-founder and chief product officer.
How do you think about education now, particularly as it relates to AI? I mean, you went to Stanford. You have a master's in education from there. You also have a master's in business administration from there. So how do you think about education, and in particular, how it applies to what you're doing now in making sure that we're preparing the next generation to enter a workforce with the skills that they need?
Yeah, absolutely. We work predominantly with a middle manager population in a Fortune 1000 company. So company A might have 5,000 people who are people managers every day. And when we think about how do you meet a learner and transform and help them develop and become better leaders, it starts by meeting them at a point that's relevant to them. So oftentimes, to your point, it's a new manager or someone entering an organization or someone who just got promoted or right before performance review. If you can meet a learner in a moment where they are really eager to be better, really eager to learn, you're going to have a lot more impact on behavior change. And one of the things that we've found is that generative AI has unlocked a realm of possibility and opportunity for us. So everything from how you can personalize when you first meet that learner to a lot of our newer simulations are actually generative, where you're interacting and practicing how you might give feedback to someone with a Gen AI character. The AI is then also giving you in the moment coaching on, hey, you gave feedback, but you didn't say why this matters. And sharing impact actually helps people understand why improvement is needed. So the AI coach will give you that. And then we're also measuring how you're doing against the discrete skills that you're practicing. And so all of that is happening in a much more personalized and a much more responsive and in a way that drives actually more behavioral change outcomes. And that's what ladders up to value for all. That's what ladders up to engagement and inclusion and belonging and retention.
What does a typical day look like for you?
Oh, I love a good routine. So I wake up pretty early. I am a morning person. I listen to a news podcast. I listen to the daily every day. I make a coffee, and then I do a meditation. I do a gratitude journal, and that doing those things gets my day in a really good place. My husband and I have a dog. On the best days, I get to go on a walk with my husband and our dog Scott. On other days, I might dive straight into some calls, but getting that morning right is so important for me. And then after, whether it's calls with the team, with clients, with investors, ending the day with a walk with my husband and the dog again. Couldn't get better.
Yeah, that's the best thing in the world. There's actually nothing better than that. There's no peak to
Yeah, exactly.
that. So what are you reading? What reading recommendations would you have for us?
I love both fiction and nonfiction. I recently finished Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, which I don't know if you've heard of that book.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I love it. I literally have been sharing it with all of my group chats. So that's been a recent read. I also there's a book called Into the Magic Shop. It's all about the kind of the power of neuroscience and manifesting and believing and working hard to achieve kind of your wildest dreams. That book has been incredibly inspiring to me in this moment. So that's been a fun read too.
Hmm. As you think about the future of AI and how it's already transforming companies and humanity, and obviously everybody's thinking about this question and nobody has a great answer for it, but I wonder what your answer might be, and maybe it is great. Uh, Around like what does all of this look like 10 years from now once AI is kind of a mainstay and is a little bit more figured out and the use cases are more applicable?
Yeah, my hope is that can we use technology in a way that helps us be more human. I think that the more that we can leverage tools that help us actually connect, leverage systems that help us actually understand and compute and draw insights that we otherwise wouldn't have, the better the world will be. And I think my hope is that we have guardrails, that we create safety protocols that enable us to use AI in a really intentional way, one that brings along all of the perspectives. I think that's been a lot of fear. I think that there's been a ton of research around the lack of not just diversity of those building with AI systems, but the outcomes when the data sets or what have you are not diverse, that aren't inclusive. And so my hope is that we're able to bring everyone along on this kind of transformation that we're going to, I think we've just dipped our toe into. And that I think that's a big risk. And I think it requires us to be really thoughtful about how and who and are building, but also what questions we're asking when we're building, what processes we have as we build. Because if we can harness kind of all of our perspectives, we can bring the best of kind of society's diversity to bear in designing and creating and ideating what even gets built. I think we're actually going to have a pretty great outcome.
Do you think we will? Do you think that
I
will
have to
happen?
believe we will. Otherwise, it is too dark for me.
It gets kind of scary if that doesn't happen.
It's absolutely scary if that doesn't happen. But my hope is that, at some point humanity will kick in and we'll be able to put those guardrails up. We'll be able to put those safety checks. We'll be able to bring those voices in the room, because I don't think any of us want to get to that dark outcome.
Yeah. I think you're right about that for sure. In your opinion, as a leader, and you're a remarkable leader, and you've built a remarkable company, what are kind of like the 3 most important traits for a leader to have?
I appreciate that question so much. I think, like on my leadership journey, I think first and foremost is just knowing my values, knowing what matters most to me, and being able to come back to that. I think one of the most detrimental things is to lead from a place that's inauthentic. And I've had to learn that the hard way, where, a management book might tell you to do something one way and you try it and you're like, woo, that did not feel good. I wish I had done it differently. And I think a lot of my leadership journey has been unlearning what I've been told is a good leader. And trying to form a new path. Some days I'm successful, some days I'm not. So I think the number one thing is to know yourself, know your values, and know how you want to show up as a leader so that you can practice that every day. I think 2 is like surrounding yourself with people who are way smarter than you, which I've absolutely tried to do. I hope to never be the smartest in the room, because if I am, we got to make the room bigger. We got to find some more folks. So that's been absolutely something I've tried to prioritize. And then I think the third thing, beyond knowing yourself, beyond building great partnerships with folks who are smarter and wiser than you are, is 3, making sure that you actually have the support of people outside of that, of whatever you're trying to lead, that you have a community, that you have a group of folks you can go to and just be true and real and share what you're feeling, cry, laugh, complain, celebrate, because the journey can be incredibly hard. It can be, the lows are low, the highs are high, and having the support around you, I think, is critical to be able to do 1 and 2 well.
You mentioned like values, and I think about values a lot, both company values and personal values, and I'm sure you do as well. How do you come up with your values, both personal and company, actually? And what are they? What's that journey like? I think that would be really interesting for a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess I can start with company values. I mean, when Heather and I met on that coffee day, I feel like our second conversation was like, what do we want our company to feel like? And mind you, we weren't a company, we hadn't founded anything, we hadn't built a business plan, but like that's where we started, of what are we aligned on? And, the values of curiosity, of open-mindedness, things that are like personal. I think they come from both of us as humans and people and our own individual values, but also I think one of the unique things about starting a company is you have a blank space in front of you to create the company you wish you had worked at. And I think we've tried that. And, my favorite conversations with Heather are like, something doesn't feel right. Like we run this company and it doesn't feel like a company we'd want to be at. So what are we going to do? How do we make it better? How do we live and go back to those values? So I think for Heather and I, we really sat down and just wrote out all the things that we wanted for a company that we had worked at in other places, or what we could imagine a company could look and feel like. For my personal values, I think those have been shaped and are continuing to shape over time. I mean, even as a young person, like I had this real focus on what is fair and what is equal or equitable. And those are the things that I've always sought out, whether it's educational or professional, and really do care deeply about valuing the diversity and uplifting of others. Believe life in the service of others is the most beautiful way in which one can live. And so I think, there can, my values can shift, how I talk about them over time can shift, but the core of it is about how do you live life in the service of others? How do you support and lift up everyone around you? And this fundamental belief that if you have opportunity, power, or privilege, how do you share that?
How do you do that?
Well, I feel like Praxis is a little bit of an extension of how do you create workplaces that actually encourage not just what we have known as the kind of meritocracy, but one where barriers are removed for those who have barriers, for those who've had to travel extra distance, that we can actually see that and value that for, value not just where someone went to college, but what they have overcome, a hustle that they have. All of those things, I think, are part of what we try to do with Praxis by helping and develop leaders who are able to connect on a human level, who are able to ask questions, who are able to check their own biases at the door. So definitely Praxis is one extension of how I think about sharing opportunity, power, and privilege. I think another is, I think a lot of people will help folks in their network. So someone who you went to grad school with, or someone who has the same investor, or someone who your best friend from high school wants to ask you for something, or wants to get your advice, or wants an introduction. And I think those are great. One of the things I've always tried to do is like folks who don't have shared connections. So if I get a message from someone on LinkedIn who has zero shared connections, but are interested in getting into startups, like those are the folks who it's like, I'm not sure if you have access to this world that I do. And I want to share that, because that person then can go share it with their network, and hopefully more people can have access. So like, that's even like a even more small way. But I do think it's about acknowledging the systems of power and privilege that you're in, and trying to get outside of them, and trying to meet people in real ways that allow you to learn from them and allow them to learn from you.
In a different time, I imagine CEOs did not have to worry too much about what was happening in the world or in their country, or maybe even in their community, although they probably had to think a little bit about what's happening in their community. Being a CEO now is completely different. You have to think about that. It's almost a requirement for the job, to be thinking about the world around you, what's happening, and all that type of stuff. And I wonder, we're in a crazy year, an election year in the United States, election year in a number of countries around the world. We're in an interesting political, economic, all of these various environments. As you think about that, one, I'd love to what's your take on that? Like, where do you think we're at? And two, like, how do you think about your responsibility as a CEO in being part of that conversation?
Yeah, it is a question I hear not just of CEOs, but of just managers. Like, I think the pandemic changed how we engage at work. The death of George Floyd, murder of George Floyd, changed how we engage at work and what topics are talked about at work. And I think not just CEOs having to look and understand socio-political events, but people managers are having to navigate differences of opinion, perspective, background, belief, and they're coming into the workplace. It's one of the reasons why one of our practice simulations is around polarizing and divisive topics, and how to manage it, and how to rephrase and realign and reaffirm and ask open-ended questions, and bring teams together who might have a divisive moment come in, a polarizing topic, whether it's someone with a poster behind them on their kind of video chat screen, or if it's someone who sends a Slack to a channel that is perceived incorrectly, all of those things. So I don't just think it's CEOs. I think everyone's trying to navigate this. I think I do believe CEOs have a responsibility. And that's not just me. It's actually, I think there was a poll that said like 60% of the workforce believes, particularly younger generations, believe that their CEOs should take a stand on some of these social political issues. And I think we know that there is power in that. I was talking to a leader earlier today who is a DE&I leader, and was like, was sharing that she was trying to take on voting rights to make sure that everyone in her workforce, which has a large kind of in the field, on the ground workforce, has the opportunity to vote and to participate, and they're a global company. And I think like those sorts of things are powerful. When you are a large enterprise and you have thousands and tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people working for you every day, you have a real opportunity to not just transform kind of your business, but to transform communities. And I think CEOs really are starting to see that, and the best are actually taking stands on that.
How do you think, it's interesting to me to see like DEI become political. Like that's like a political thing now. Like that's actually like part of this election, I would even say.
Yep. Yep.
Which is kind of an interesting thing. Like DEI, as I've experienced it, probably as you experienced it, like kind of came from the tech business community trying to, figure out how do we make equal opportunities, things like this. As you think about DEI and where it stands now, I mean, I guess just that's the question. What do you think about where it stands now?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that there have been so many attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion as an acronym, right? Because I think there would be fewer attacks on what the goals and outcomes are really of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And that is that we create more value for everyone and we cause less harm along the way. I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't get on board with that. And I think part of why we've seen this pushback is that there were strides being made. And I think when you see that there is diversity in a candidate pool for a role where there didn't used to be, where there's maybe less competition, that can be scary. It can feel like you are losing power. But I think what we have not done as well is tell the story of how actually DEI benefits us all. It actually makes all of our lives better. It makes all of our workplaces better. It makes all of our products and services better. And I think we learn some of these lessons when you think about designing at the margins that, if you put in kind of slopes and sidewalks, that actually helps not just folks who are in wheelchairs or moms who are, or dads or siblings rolling strollers. It actually helps a lot of different people. And I think we've kind of lost that in the kind of back and forth messaging of what we're really trying to solve for here. And my hope is that even with the politicization of DEI, that workplaces, leaders, community organizations are still able to make good on what we were trying to achieve. And whether it's called inclusive cultures, whether it's called cultures that work for all, I care less about the language we're using and more about ensuring that there are equitable outcomes, that there are inclusive outcomes, that we are able to bring the diversity of society and perspectives into everything we're building and creating.
What are some products, apps, or tools that you use like on a daily basis or quite consistently that you couldn't live without?
I think apps and tools I can't live without. I mean, I'm on email all day long. I'm on Slack all day long. But I think the tools I do love listening to books, to podcasts. So like whether it's my audiobooks or whether it's my like podcast app, like those are daily uses for me. I am a sucker for step counts. So those walks with Scott and my husband, it's like, are we above 10,000? Are we approaching 20,000? I love like mid walk, I'm adding loops if we need to. But truthfully, I like have no social media apps on my phone. I do try to stay off my phone as much as possible, truthfully.
That is very healthy. Has that always been the case? Like how do you focus? I mean, obviously these walks are critical and important for you, as they should be for everyone. But to have that discipline to not have any of these things on your phone is actually pretty remarkable. So how do you think about your mental health? How do you maintain your mental health? And what went into your decision? Like, I'm just not even going to put these things on my phone.
I have found that when I download Instagram, I will be on Instagram. And I'm grateful for the web developers who have made the web experience much less enjoyable and easy to use, because it allows me to say, I'm going to hop off. But I think, that is part of my mental health. Like I don't love looking up and being like, have I just spent like 30 minutes like doing nothing, like just seeing lives that don't even feel real. So absolutely, that's part of my mental health. I think that daily, like my morning routine is so critical to just like feeling grounded. I go to therapy. I do couples therapy with my partner, with my founder. Essentially, we do like executive coach sessions together so we can work on our partnership. So I'm like a big proponent of having all of the supports that you can to kind of build around you. gotten into acupuncture. I find that incredibly relaxing and grounding. So I definitely do a lot of different things to just feel well, exercise being another one of them.
Finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com. We believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
So many people have given me a chance. It's like hard to name just one. I think one that really stood out to me is when I was quite young. Actually, I had a fourth grade math teacher, and I had been really high performing in math, and I there was like a competitive edge in me in the math class, and then I like kind of missed something. Like he had this, I like just didn't understand a concept, and I did really poorly on one test. And I remember he pulled me into his room and he was like, "What happened?" And I was like, "Honestly, I don't know. I thought I'm really confused myself." Um, and he was like, "Well, we need to figure this out because you are like you are high performing math, and I want you to know that about yourself, and I want you to come back and retake this test." And I think it is one of those things where I think a lot of times people can let one test fly by, not check in. And I think a teacher can be so powerful for transforming your perspective of yourself. Like I felt important. I felt like I was being taken care of and looked after. And I think that can go a really long way. And so Mr. Sweeney made a real impact on me.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Wow, that's incredible. Elise, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really, it means a lot.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a privilege, and I appreciate the time to get to chat.